Good day, and welcome to another Portals Live. I'm Peter, and I'm here with Patrick in Seattle, Kyriaki in Greece, Lisa in Texas, and Aviv also in Seattle. We're here to talk about portals into the soul, which is an ongoing work that we've been getting into pretty much all year on portals of perception. And we've published 2 chapters thus far, and it's a very wide-ranging work that opens up new ways to think about the soul. And so we thought we'd, in advance of our June 1st event, which we have coming up, we'd talk with the author, Aviv Shahar, about the soul and what it really means to us, because we all have maybe some idea that we've picked up along the way of what our soul is and what it does, but it might be a more important friend and relationship than we've ever given it credit for. So we want to look into those territories and see what it might mean for our lives. So welcome. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Peter. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, good to see you. Well, one of the things about the soul is that we learned in chapter 1 is that it does 3 main things for us. One is helps us survive. It's part of our survival. It helps us grow and learn, and it helps us realize our greater potential, our greater possibility, and help us find meaning and purpose in our lives. And it's nudging us all the days of our lives. So we thought that this would be a good opportunity to take us a deeper step into all of this. So, Aviv, can you fill us in on what you've been doing? I know you've been busy at work on this.
Okay.
Because is there any update with how the progress of this process is going?
Yeah, I thought you were going to pass the ball to Lisa, but I'm fine to play to pick the ball and respond here. So first of all, thank you all 4 of you for the generative work you've been cultivating here in these live conversations, and yeah, truly your care and love of the inquiry and the idea that we humans can inquire into these kind of questions about the soul and make some headways. So I appreciate very much your dedication, love of the project, and in that sense, we are evolving it together. It's a very curious thing in the way it is developing, because and maybe as I say this, I'll offer a few important starter distinctions as we start. This is not some academic study, okay? And I'm not sitting in one of the elite universities building a course material that I will then be teaching year after year after year. Most of the work I happen to be doing over the last 4 decades has always been a one-off and has been mostly an outplay of a persistent contemplative inquiry. So there is an important distinction in that. Academic studies are great, just in this sense, it is more of a living, embodied contemplative inquiry. The second distinction I'll offer is this is not some new fixed dogma. It's a running discovery, running revelation. And within that, the third distinction is I'm not some all-knowing guru. I see myself more as a journey Sherpa. And you'll find that if you trace the now more than 200 conversations we have on portals, and I rarely do Q&A. And the reason I rarely do Q&A is because my experience, having worked with groups and teams in personal development and the spiritual journey part of the street, the side of the street, and on the other side of the street, where I've worked for many, many years with leadership teams, that often Q&As, people configure questions often in a way that they look for you to fit a certain answer into the framing of the question. And I've made a very successful career out of reframing people's questions. So today I said I'm being summoned by the four of you into a Q&A. I'll try to behave and actually answer the question for a change, because typically what my internal process is, I hear the question and I go into a contemplative inquiry in myself that is asking, where is the question coming from? Why is it being asked? And then, more importantly, I have discovered that it's not so much that people need more concepts or more words. What we need is to pivot from words and concepts to embodied practices and to trailheads. So more of what I have often been offering. And if you say, what is portals into the soul? Portals into the soul is trailheads. And those chapters, they include pathways that somebody can actually explore in their life and then make their own discovery. Because I am not an all-knowing guru, I'm a journey Sherpa. My interest is not me giving you a destination answers, but more in what is it that we can fashion that you can then take into your life, your work life, your relational life, your management with money, management in the various communal endeavors that you're involved in, and your management of your own personal development journey, such that you can get results. So I'd offer that, and perhaps the last two distinctions in the opening is to offer that Peter, as you said, what the preamble and the two chapters that we have released so far assert is that we can each have a conversation with our soul. We are each accompanied by a soul all the days of our life, and we are each free to listen, to engage, to develop a conversation with the soul. And yes, you do not need to embark on a spiritual journey to do so. You are actually already on a spiritual journey, whether you believe it or not. You cannot be a human and not be on a spiritual journey. By definition, if you're a human, you have a spirit, and whether you believe in it or not, your spirit is having a journey with and through your experience, and it may be having an experience with a human model, cultivating the belief that there is no such a thing. Well, so that's the experience you're creating in this spiritual journey of yours. So, number one, this is not an academic study. It is a living, embodied inquiry. Number two, I'm not an all-knowing guru. I'm more a journey Sherpa. Number three, we're not dealing here with a new fixed dogma, but rather with a running discovery and revelation. And number three, really each and every person is free to have a conversation with your soul. And yes, you do not need to embark on any specific spiritual or religious framework to access or to experience those things. You are a human being, and so by definition, you are on a spiritual journey. How about this as just some opening frames?
Yeah, I mean, that's excellent because I think that's such an important idea, because really the way you present this work is that the soul is a tool and a helper, and we can access it. We can have this conversation, as you say, with it, and listen to it if we learn to listen to it. So it's there for us if as much as we want it to be, is the impression I get from the work. And and I think it's important to understand that that's just kind of life. We are on a spiritual journey, as you say, whether we have some formality to it or not. And so this is a bridge to what we naturally are. So I think those are great ideas to put forth about our soul and how we can have a relationship with it.
Yeah. Perhaps, if I may, Peter, the one nuance, as you said, the soul is there for us all the days of our life, number one. Number two, our access can be curtailed somewhat by our experience, and that's largely what chapter 2 is about. And number three, even when our access is curtailed, the soul unto itself is forever whole and undamaged. So part of what we're here to evolve this conversation about is how is that playing out, and I think we're going to discover where the conversation goes. So please.
I can start with my question, but I think first, Lisa, you want to welcome our friend?
Thank you, Kyriaki. I'm having a little tech trouble, so if you lose me, just let me know. I won't know. Lose my voice, I should say. So first, I just wanted to say thank you, Aviv, for that wonderful opening. I do really like the concept of running revelation. Isn't that a fantastic way to think about new knowledge? It's continuously running and offering revelation. So thank you for that. The other thing I just wanted to say was these are such practical, practices. You mentioned practices. These are such important and practical practices in one's life that can make such a big difference. It can be a tiny little thing that we're just thinking about or reframing, but then it can make such a big difference. So thank you for that. And I did want to welcome everyone. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. And we'd love to hear from you. You can put in a comment at any time during the conversation. And ask a question, make a comment, let us know you're there, tell us what country you're in, and welcome to everyone. So I will turn it back to you, Kyriaki, for the first question.
Yes, thank you. Well, I want to say that we have established in chapter 1 that the way we are approaching the soul is that it is a functionary, it is a gift that helps us navigate in the planetary life, and that it is a kind of medium between our energetic compound, which we call the spirit, and our body, our planetary senses and life. Now, I'm wondering whether the fact that we have anxiety reaching the levels of an epidemic, I mean, according to the World Health Association, more than 301 million people are experiencing symptoms of anxiety. More of them are women, and often these symptoms are showing up from childhood and adolescence, and they impact negatively our family lives, our work, our school lives, our communities. And they give us a sense of restlessness, this sense of anxiety, a sense of fear, a sense of doom or imminent danger, and there is a series of symptoms that it expresses itself. And I'm wondering whether that has to do with the separation of the soul. I mean, we're having these conversations with Peter, Patrick, and Lisa. And I'm wondering, because we said that when there is a separation from the soul feels contracted, and that it loses its energetic power, its functional stature, it disconnects with its natural qualities and its charm. So I'm wondering if it has to, if this anxiety has to do with the separation events, with the separation of the soul.
Well, thank you for for the question, Kiraki. The short answer is yes and yes and yes. And indeed, chapter 2 describes what we are coining as separation events. And it then describes what we're describing as the double agony, which is essentially the incident and the event itself and its impact, and then the distancing or the separation that has occurred from the natural inclination, the natural blessing of the natural flow and bliss and enhancement of the soul. So that's the double whammy or the double agony. And we're describing that creates a third condition, which has the nature of a psychology of a soul to which and with which it takes it expresses itself as a compensatory act, which is essentially what we are describing as a ghost. A lot more about this we will describe and go into perhaps on June 1st. What I'll say directly to your question is that the epidemic of depression, the epidemic of anxiety, the epidemic of suicidal preoccupation with teens, and I can go on with a list that describes the crisis of mental health globally, and especially with youth. All of that, these are byproducts, these are symptoms of a broad separation. These are, if you like, expressions, the cause of which I would describe as a separation crisis. Now, what is a separation crisis? It goes beyond the narrower definition that we are offering to the separation event in chapter 2. But in the simplest way, we can describe it as the sense of being separated and distanced from sources of well-being, from sources of enhancement, from the natural sources of nourishment of human life. And it is that displacement that is expressing itself in so many of those symptoms, the mental health crisis. So I'd say that's the first thing to offer about this. The second thing is that given that, it would be correct to observe, I believe, that the whole of humanity is experiencing this kind of a separation crisis drama, and therefore we are seeing many, not just individual, personal ghosts, which is essentially the focus of chapter 2, but I will probably get to it in a much later stage in the development of the project, where we will talk more about is there such a thing as a collective soul? And the answer is likely to be not in the way we are describing a personal soul in that way, but in another way, there is an aggregated formation, energetic formation that can function as a collective soul in any situation where a group of people come together. And when we describe that, we can begin to also describe collective ghosts. And there are many of those acting out all over the planet at the moment. And that's what wars are about. That's what endless strife and conflict is about. So I'd offer that as a starter to your question.
Thank you. Thank you. It's more for thought. Thank you.
If I could offer a little bit of, I guess, a follow-up question, but it's such an amazing, fantastic territory to bring up, the idea that so many people are experiencing anxiety, because we talked about the soul as trying to help us in all three phases of our life, both just physically and nudging us to grow and learn, and hopefully we all get reconnected to that sense we have a higher purpose and we're doing something. But if you look at anxiety, I mean, some people are even wondering if there's going to be a future. And so you can see that anxiety hitting at all those three dimensions of life. And people are sort of wondering, how do I deal with this? And that's why I found the work into the soul to be so helpful, as simply this is a guide and this is a companion who can maybe nudge me into, helping me realize how I can deal with this anxiety. But I guess that brings up the first question is, Aviv, what would you advise someone, maybe as a first step? They're feeling anxious at one of those dimensions, and they're really trying to understand more about what the soul really is and what it can do for them and how it's trying to nudge them back to something better. What's that first step to try to engage actively with the soul and be open to that kind of influence?
Thank you, Patrick. So I will answer it concretely, although let me reflect, you are asking a what question, that you're asking a how question framed as a what question, which is fine. Why I make a point about this is because even the way it framed in terms of from anxiety and how do you access the soul, one of the discoveries I stumbled on, I think initially 40 years ago, so in my mid-20s, was that most how questions, they are framed from a place of absence. So they are honest, but they don't always get you the answer you're looking for. So somebody doesn't have money and they say, how can I become a millionaire? Or somebody is upset and distressed and full of anxiety, and they say, how can I be happy? So what you have in that framing, and I think it's legitimate and important that you bring it to the table, because this is prevalent. You can find it everywhere, especially in the Western world. Although, what is the Western world today? The Western world is everywhere. Where the framing is, I am here in trouble, and from the place of absence of money, absence of love, absence of happiness, absence of whatever, a person makes a projection to the presence of something, and they ask the how question, imagining that will get them there. So that's why I said at the beginning that I've been resisting generally answering those kind of questions, because what I've found people need in these circumstances, somebody holding them in their hand and actually, as you ask, lead them to the first step and embark on a journey. So the answer can never be a destination answer, but here is how you can begin the journey. So, well, you're saying, what's the first step to get the sense of the soul? The first step is to find some way to get centered. Find some way to get centered, way that works for you, which is why it cannot be formulaic, because we are each wired differently. Some people, many people who will watch this, perhaps many people who will watch this already are in that place of having been able to center themselves. But many people, they are largely, as I described earlier, displaced from themselves. So they are either 20 inches out of themselves or 5 kilometers away from themselves. And what do I mean displaced or outside of themselves? Well, if you're worried about the bank account, part of you is in your bank account right now. if you are worried about what the stock market is doing, part of you is actually not here and now, not in your body, not present here, but is displaced to that place. So any worry, any concern that's outside of your field gets you in your head and gets you actually largely fragmented and displaced. Now, I can say these things from experience because there was a time I was worried about the bank account, and a part of me was in that space, and there was a time I was worried what the stock market was doing. So I discovered that if I wanted to be deeper in what I'm proposing to you as the first step, which is get centered, I needed to address all these other questions. So that's why living a life is not a one-line response. It is something you need to address and create a throughout strategy. So if you said, okay, what might be the first step to get centered? Well, so some people, they will take the first half an hour or the first hour of a day, and they will journal, or they will sit quiet, or they will meditate, or they will go into some slow motion work, not necessarily just Tai Chi, but other modalities. We are offering some practices like that in the IHOW set of practices, and we will upload over time more and more of these. Some people will listen to music. Some people will find other modalities and other practices that will help them essentially get centered here and now and be present. And I would say that's the first step.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just to add to that, we had a Portals into the Soul event a month or so back, and one of the striking aspects of it was this internal human orchestra work, where there was movement and bringing settlement and balance and ways to kind of realign ourselves, regather ourselves. And when I think about this soul work, I see, well, so just to say that on Portal's website is the IHOW practices. We have quite a few of them now, if you want to access those. But in nature, you see this kind of settlement in wildlife. They have intensity, and then they go to a state of calm. I watch a lot of these videos of animals, and it's amazing to me how they switch from intensity to calm. And I think that must be something. I don't know. I don't think they have a soul like we have a soul, but maybe the species has a soul, and so that's something that rebalances them and reconnects them to their natural state very quickly, and it's just always been fascinating to me.
Yeah, thank you. And
let me just comment to what Peter, to what you're saying. The specific reason why this realization that people often ask from absence about the presence of something, the reason we are advising that the first step is to get centered and to begin to get present right here, right now. As you never see a tree in the forest asking how. You never see a tiger in the woods asking how. As you said, Peter, they are in their elements, so they are joined to the natural line. Although you could say that when you go to a zoo, you find that in some circumstances they've been trained out of the natural response. But what underlies it even deeper is the realization that this is the evidence of this universe is that life begets life. And happiness creates more of happiness. And love emancipates more love. And flow offers the pathways to unlock and unleash more of flow. So I call this the law of the tree. The law of the tree is that it grows from its own roots. You've never gone into the forest and found a tree in one side of the forest full of envy and jealousy about why another tree is growing faster. No, it doesn't try to grow from the roots of the other tree. It actually tries to grow from its own roots. And oh, by the way, the trees in the forest, they help each other grow. Even though you could say that they are in some way or shape or form competing for space in the canopy so they each get light, they do through the roots and through the mycelium network, through the fungus in the forest. They do help each other grow and transmit strength to where there is weakness or illness in the forest from the place of strength. So perhaps we can take a lesson or two from the forest.
That's it's fantastic. And one little point that I wanted to bring in from earlier is why I've enjoyed so much the material on the soul and working into it is I know a lot of people will have this kind of mental picture of the soul as being one thing. It's a part of our spiritual life. It's part of the universal God thing, right? But as we try to explain, or as the content tries to explain, the soul is there to help us navigate our life on this planet in all of its many expressions. And we can call on the soul, that sort of intelligence, to help us in all of these situations, not just something that we might think is religious or spiritual. It's really something that can help us integrate. To me, it's helping me integrate all these different parts of my life. And I know there's something that can help guide me through that and is there to help me no matter what kind of the expression is or what part of life I find myself feeling anxious about today. And it varies from hour to hour.
Indeed, Patrick. So the content and the next chapters will unfold more of that, including talking to your the various parts over time that will become part of where the journey will lead into the portals into the soul. There is also the sense that how this body of work wants to unfold is that it doesn't want to just get narrowed down to how do we fix our problem, which is why you'll see in chapter 3 and chapter 4 and chapter 5, it takes an even broader context about this time, why this work at this time, how does it relate to what we are experiencing at this time. So yeah, all of the above it involve questions we will get to more over time.
So following on this line, I might ask a question. So I love the idea of centering oneself. I know when I garden, I feel really settled and very aligned. We all have our ways. And we instinctively know when we're feeling calm, settled, intact, and we know when we're not. Life starts to appear. How do we recognize it? And I don't want to preempt June 1st, but how do we actually recognize the what is coming at us, if you will, that might be from the past, might be coming from outside, things that we're taking in from other people, taking in from the news, for example, and how this ghost life might sort of rear, as you would say, its ugly head and take us off our course?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Lisa. So I guess a good place to pick it up is to say, Aviv, you just said that the first step is to get centered. So what's step 2? So step 2 is when you get centered, practice listening inside. Practice listening inside. what you have is that people are very trained to listen outside of themselves, literally listen outside of themselves, and not so much listen inside. There are many people where you tell them, try to listen inside, and they wouldn't even know what you mean, because the access, that inner attunement, that we actually have an interior life, and we don't just listen to the outside, or be placed outside, or disjointed even from the self, from yourself, from being in the body. All that is something that actually requires practice. I mean, you could say, how does a violin player, how do they know that they are playing a C or a D or an E or an F? Practice. And some are gifted with easy attuned access that they have not. Often the gifted is to do with, they've not been forced out of the natural attunement of the system, because the human system is highly musical. But for many of us, through all sorts of socializations, essentially other people's thinking we're not singing in tune, letting us know that we shouldn't be playing music, we've been trained out of the natural attunement to music. I know, because I was raised in a musical family, and to a degree it was trained out of me. So because I was not the musical superstar that perhaps my mother thought I should be, I don't know if she thought so, but I became earlier on self-aware of when I was in tune or out of tune, and I became shy or inhibited in that sense. And in a similar way, you have people experiencing in all aspects of life. So this is why, as Peter started with those three natures, three characters, three lives of the soul, we said right in chapter 1, there are those three lives. They keep you alive, help you learn and progress, and guide you to draw closer to your purpose. And those voices, those nudges, they will appear with a different tune, a different sound. And then, Lisa, as we begin to do more internal attunement and calibration, we begin to recognize that, oh, by the way, there are many other inner voices, and they are not all the same, and some have a different nature. And part of the practice is learning to differentiate between those. Let me just name three categories, three other inner voices that we will go to way in the future when I get to write about this. But nothing here is linear, so there's nothing wrong with going into content that has actually not been written yet. So category one is what you can generally describe as body programming or bodily programs. Each and every system in the body has its own program to help it stay in its optimal equilibrium, which means it has a nudge, a programmed nudge, to let you know when there is too much of something that you need to get rid of, or when there is too little of something that you need to bring in and get into the system. That's how the respiratory system works. That's how the digestive system works. And these are the two obvious examples, but there are many other systems in the human where you be nudged to get some exposure to light, right? So different parts of you love the direct exposure to light, natural light, preferably sunlight. And so you'll get these bodily programs. And if you don't address these bodily programs and the nudges, that is, allow yourself to get rid of what you no longer need or acquire and bring what you need, well, it will create stress and strain that will build even more. So that's category one of nudges that are not the kind of voice we are describing in what we are interested to, especially practice attunement to. Now, mind you, when I talk about bodily program, they're also part of the soul symphony, because every voice in the larger orchestra is mediated and facilitated by the soul. And yet at the same time, we are practicing this sense of, well, what are those different voices inside me, different nudges? Category 2 are emotions. So emotions, especially, and that's relevant to chapter 2, where we talk about separation events and the ghosts, we're particularly in that referring to what you can describe as emotional hangovers or lingering emotional weights. And those are associated with unprocessed, unmetabolized experiences that created some kind of a sense of energy of wound, energy of separation, energy of pain, energy of those unmetabolized wounds. And those will have a way of surfacing time and again, often in the point where you least want them to surface, but it's because something in the system is hijacked by what has not been metabolized, has not been processed. It's like if you queued your computer to print a document and you were not connected to the printer, and you come a week later and you want to print that document, it will first print the document that was in the queue that didn't print out, because it's loaded in the system to come out. So in a similar way, with the emotional system, there are loadings and content, emotional content, that has not been metabolized, and often it will come through a complaint. And this is something I actually teach in the corporate space with leadership teams, which is that complaint is often an expression of an unmet need, an unrealized unmet need, or even unexpressed request. And to help them be more effective in the way they manage, I help them convert complaints into expressing and naming the specific request and the need, and thereby dramatically accelerate the conversation. We can do that with ourselves. So part of the work on the developmental journey is, well, how can I name more clearly what are the unmet needs, the unexpressed needs? And when I do so, I begin to be more in tune with my own energetic state, my own feelings, my own experiences, my own emotions. And oh, by the way, I then get to access more clearly the voice, the sound, the nudge, the inner nudge. It's probably better described as a nudge, intuitive nudge or impulse of the soul. The third category are brain egoic defensive responses. So brains, I said on one or two calls before that we will get to the brains. I'm not sure now exactly when, whether it's going to be chapter 5 or chapter 6, because there is another content that says, well, this part needs to show up before that, which tells you I am listening to this running revelation and following the trail more than I'm fully know where the trail is leading. But what we do know, so I'll do a brief thing about this here, about the brain. We can understand that brains are a tribe, and when we are located in the egoic defensive part of the brain, it will bring up in us competitiveness and defensiveness. So these again are not natures that you will associate with the soul in the obvious way when you say, I want to listen to my soul. Okay, so I just gave you 3 categories: body programs, emotions, and defensive brain egoic responses. And if you said, well, can you decode some guidelines to how to know what is what? I'd say that the voice, the soul's voice, by nature is cool. And some of these other 3 categories can be much faster to be heated. The soul's nudge is subtle and quiet, and those others can be noisy, can become a cacophony in your head. When the brain goes right now, when people are in conversation and they don't really listen to the conversation, they think, what are they going to say next, or how are they going to prove me wrong, and why do I say something about the soul that is not lined up with what they've learned in seminary, in the theology class, or in another body of work somewhere else, which, by the way, may be relevant and important, but those preoccupations are not the kind of attunement that you're looking for to, when we talk about develop the capacity to listen to your soul. So that's why so much of the Eastern practices are based on getting out of your heads and getting in your body and getting fully present, and release the agenda of needing to prove to be smarter or better or whatever, something else, which is often a compensating behavior to in whatever way we're being triggered by the circumstance we are in. So these are some cues to how to listen and calibrate the voice. It is cool rather than hot, more subtle and quiet rather than noisy. It has a liberating nature to it rather than disempowering. It is empowering rather than disempowering. It is not fear-inducing, but it is liberating, and it has a long wave rather than short wave. So how about that as a starter?
Marvelous. Wow, marvelous explanation. Very, very clear, and makes me think once again how important it is not to have all these little unresolved issues going around and around, just to keep things clear and tidy in one's life. Very important.
Yeah. You do have a bit of a delay on technical issue, but we got what you're saying. You're saying how critical it is to, if you want to listen to your soul, I'll translate what you're saying, Lisa. You want to take care, you want to be a good gardener of your garden. You want to take care of business. You want to finish the unfinished business. You want to attend, not deny and suppress the unmet needs, the body programs, so to speak, that need their attention. You want to pay attention to the whole person that you are, because guess what? The soul wants to take care of the whole of you, not just a part of you, and not just of itself or herself. So that's why I'm saying all those internal voices, they are mediated through the soul. You want to take care of those different parts, different voices, so you can actually get to the deeper sense of the voice underlying all this.
Yes, absolutely marvelous. Thank you.
It just reminds me that this kind of return to a more natural state that has been brought up. It's also this speed. You know, we're in a world that is just coming at us at, you know, incredible speed from every direction: social media, phones, events, and to me, it even seems like time is passing much faster than it ever used to. So the soul seems to operate at a slower pace, and the listening to it happens when we're slowed down in ourselves, when we take a moment, when we settle ourselves in whatever way works for us. And I think that's so important, just because that is a more natural state. This kind of frenzy that we can get into if we are in response to so many things in the world is not that natural place. It's not that. It's stepping away from our better foundation. So yeah, I think that's just always a good reminder to be with that idea. Well, and yeah, please
No,
bring us into a landing, Aviv, and because
well,
I know we could go all day here because it's a
yeah.
fascinating subject.
Well, I will say that yes, absolutely, you're right, and about slowing down. So one of the practices that I have practiced for many years, even in my 20s and 30s, so that's quite a while back, I would every day spend 10 or 15 minutes in slow motion walk. Because what happens, I found that when you walk slowly, and it has a feel, or visually it looks a little bit like Tai Chi, but it doesn't have to be Tai Chi, right? You can simply walk slowly. And because some people, when you ask them to be present in the here and now, they find it difficult to just sit down and go into the practice of not attaching to the thoughts and feelings. So that's why for many, the practice of getting present begins by paying attention to your breath, your inhale and your exhale. Well, an alternative to that is walk in slow motion and pay attention to your feet, or pay attention to your palm, or pay attention to any part of you. Pay attention to your spine and how it feels when you walk slowly. And when you do so, it helps you indeed regulate and slow down from that heightened frenzy that you describe. So perhaps we're landing with that. I don't know, Peter. Was there any other question? I can take another few minutes here. Was there any other question you wanted to ask?
Well, the part of it is about this idea that we can, just knowing about our soul can change things for us. And I think it's fascinating because I've always believed that, consciousness, changes. When we come to really know and believe in something, it will have ramifications rolling out. And so I think about the soul in this way. It's been easy to say not have a relationship or just ignore it and know it as an abstract idea, but this kind of coming into contact with the soul and creating a conversation ongoingly every day, slowing down to listen to it, those kinds of things seems to be something that maybe we shouldn't ignore. It's not just a it's not just a interesting fact or an interesting thing to talk about. It's not an intellectual exercise, but this work of the soul and this creating this relationship with the soul seems to be something that is actually important as a fundamental part of our life experience and life journey. So it's not really a question, but it just strikes me as this is not to be ignored. It's an important
Well,
thing.
yes, indeed, and what you're describing there could start us on another full hour conversation. Let me just give you the trailhead, because I said I'm inclined to think in terms of trailheads. The trailhead promoted by this thought, by this contemplation you offered, is to do with why we say that this is different to academic study. So we've all been in the modern world, especially through the late 19th century and into the 20th century and into today, had this formative experience of going to school and studying all sorts of important tools for life, how to calculate and how to formulate this and how to follow the rules of grammar, and that I'm still learning, by the way, and so on and so forth, including how to formulate and think in terms of even theories in the social sciences. And what we're trying to offer here is very different. Different in the sense that we're describing access to a living journey. And in a way, this is not learning or teaching in the modern sense of going to school and you're now going to learn some new facts. I think of this more as a journey to remember. So your soul, our souls, is a very important member of the orchestra. It's the orchestrator of the orchestra, and part of the journey involves a remembering of that. And so when you internalize a cosmology of understanding and appreciation that resonates with how you're actually wired in the inner cosmology of life, there is an instant activation, or activation. You become psychoactive in every part of you. You become energized by it, because it's not that you took in some new fact from somebody who wrote something or said something, me or anybody else. It's more that what it allowed you was to receive the information, but truly remember that know-how, that knowledge on the inside. Which is why I would perhaps offer in closing, whatever we offer in these conversations and in the chapters in Portals into the Soul, I said right at the outset in the preamble, don't take anything as a given. Don't say it is so because Aviv said so. No, find out for yourself, figure out for yourself what works for you. And it may be that some specific idea or paragraph or particular line of inquiry is your entry into this. This is not a dogmatic teaching. And the better way to use this body of work is to find how are you activated on the inside, how are you making your journey into listening and dialoguing with the soul, and how are you discovering the importance of that at this time when we see so much strife and struggle and confusion and all that, Kyriaki, you started us with in terms of the mental crisis, mental health crisis in the world. And one of the things we will address on June 1st is on chapter 2, there is earlier in the beginning a comment, a kind of a download of bullets of the facets of the meta crisis. Why it's there is because, again, I was guided by the work to put the context of the portals into the soul inside this specific context of the meta crisis. So one of the elements that we will get to, I believe, on June 1st, is too much material or content that already wants to make itself into this, because we want to make sure it is participative and will involve some practices. One of the elements that we will integrate will be an interior reflection of any of these bullets. What is the soul dimension of any of those crisis points we're describing in the world? Because, once again, our aspiration here is to help you journey to discover your soul and discover whatever your experience in life was. Your soul is undamaged, is whole, and even when we struggled in life and experienced pain and trauma, we can make a full journey to full engagement with the prospect and the permissions of living a soulful life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aviv, and thank you, everyone. These are only starters. Much more will be revealed in the June 1st event. So you can go into Portals into the Soul, to the site in the events section, and register to get your Zoom link. And it will be a joy to have you with us. And thank you all that have been with us today. So,
Yes. Thank you, Aviv. Thank you all. And we'll
Thank
see you
you very
again.
much.
Thank you.
See you
See you
again
soon.
soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.